Hello, welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The top global story we are tracking this evening. Donald Trump has been sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. He has promised a golden age of America and an immediate end to Biden's ruinous economic policies. Back in India, the Narendra Modi government is swiftly readying a plan for Trump 2.0. Since December, with several high-level visits, India has made an early contact with Trump administration and had the first bilateral immediately after inauguration as well. So what are Trump's immediate priorities and how will he approach India? Donald Trump laid out his vision before the world at Davos World Economic Forum. He urged all companies to manufacture in America. He said, and I quote, "Come, make your product in America and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth." End of quote. He has vowed to slash corporate tax rate to 15% for companies who make their products in America and has threatened to impose tariffs if companies don't manufacture in America. He also hit out at European Union and Canada for being unfair and was scathing in his criticism about European Union's treatment of Apple and American airlines. He has promised a golden age for America by reducing inflation, making US the capital of AI and crypto, and by demanding interest rates to drop in the US and the rest of the world. He has urged Saudi Arabia and OPEC to cut oil prices. He spoke about the Russia-Ukraine war 3 times in his speech at Davos and even said that he wants to meet Putin soon. He said that the ridiculous Russia-Ukraine war needs to stop. He went to the extent of saying that Ukraine was ready for a deal and Russia now needs to agree soon. Further going on to say that millions of young people have died in the killing fields in Europe. On China, he said that he likes Xi Jinping and wants a level playing field with China. Nothing phenomenal. Trump did not mention India in his speeches so far, but here are his priorities. While trade is progressing well at over $119 billion US has a $35 billion trade deficit with India or trade surplus in favor of India. Trump is likely to be hard on India when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to importing more from the United States. He's likely to push more energy exports to India as well. He would want to check illegal immigration. There are approximately 18,000 Indians illegally staying in the US, and America is set to seek their deportation to India. He could also slap high tariffs on Indian IT, pharma, textiles and auto sectors, demand greater access for US cars, dairy, agri products and seek a trade deal with India at the earliest. He would want a level playing field with Indian companies when it comes to American e-commerce, banking companies working in India. He's likely to visit India soon and as early as 2025 because the Quad Leaders Summit will be held in India. Discussions are also on for a Modi visit to US in 2025 as well. The good thing is that the External Affairs Minister Subramanian Jaishankar had the first bilateral with Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, immediately after the new Trump cabinet was sworn in. Cooperation in defense, critical emerging technology will continue to be focus areas. Let me now go across to Ashok Malik, chair of the India practice at the Asia Group. Mr. Malik, thank you very much for joining us on Global Eye. How do you think Indian businesses should be approaching Trump 2.0? Trump definitely at Davos seemed more confident, more sure of himself.
The US is simply India's most important business partner. It's a big market for India. It's a source of technology. It's a source of partnership in emerging areas such as AI, robotics, quantum computing, even green energy. That is not the Trump administration's priority, but that is the priority of many institutions in America. And of course, the defense partnership has been progressing. And it's a source of capital for investment in India, for India's capital markets, including our stock markets. So in that sense, the US relationship is very important, will always be important, irrespective of who the US president is and his or her immediate priorities. Having said that, Trump is also obviously indicating a continuation of a more sort of protectionist mindset that has engulfed America in recent times. There's been a pushback against global trade. Much of the complaint is not against India, it's against China, it's against other Asian countries, it's against Germany. But India is also there somewhere in the mix. It's in the mix for 2 reasons. One, there is a deficit with India, a small deficit, as you said, $35 billion, but a deficit nevertheless, and that has got Trump's attention. Second, in certain areas, India is seen as unduly protectionist. certain types of agricultural products. We can't open up everything because we can't hurt our own farmers, but we can open up certain types of products. You know, in the old days, there used to be a lot of debate about Californian almonds. Then it became a debate about Washington apples. Both of those did open up to some degree. They can be more opening up. So energy, certainly we are an energy deficient country, and while we are trying to transition to green energy, there is still ample scope to buy traditional energy, both crude oil and natural gas. The US was a big supplier of crude oil and natural gas under Trump 1.0. This died out with the Biden administration. It will come back now. It's a medium-term window. It's not a long-term window because India will transition to green energy.
Right.
Nevertheless, there is scope here. Then there are other areas of energy such as nuclear. The conversation did begin with Biden. It will continue under Trump and hopefully could lead to something, especially in terms of small and modular nuclear reactors. In certain types of manufactured goods, including high technology goods, defense equipment and platforms, we are already buying from the US. We could buy more. However, there has been progress on co-production and co-development. Under Biden, India would want to see that continuing. To preserve those technology partnerships and defense relationships, if certain adjustments in tariffs have to be made, I guess the government will be willing to make them up to a certain point.
Right. What are the concessions you think he's going to seek for American companies? You know, yesterday in his speech, he said it several times that companies like Apple are being treated very unfairly in the European Union. American airlines are being treated unfairly. His direction, his indication was not towards India. But when it comes to companies like Amazon, when it comes to automotive giants in the United States, what do you think is Trump's focus going to be?
Look, if this were the 1980s or 1990s, the discussion between US and Indian trade representatives would be on market access for manufactured goods from America. But there's obviously been an evolution since then. And the bulk of what America can sell to India is actually in the intangibles, services, e-commerce. The opening up of e-commerce, the greater opening up of e-commerce will certainly be on the table. Cryptocurrency. This election has seen a lot of investment by the cryptocurrency industry in the Trump administration. Trump has taken a businessman's view of crypto. This is a tipping point, I would argue, for the mainstreaming of crypto. It's not without its concerns, but there is a certain tipping point. We need to recognize that. Companies, especially in the US, I suspect including Indian companies through the US and Western subsidiaries, are showing crypto assets on their balance sheets. This is new. It's happening. How we square that
Mr. Malik,
circle? Yeah.
The crypto point is very important, as you mentioned, because India has not imposed any blanket ban on cryptocurrencies, but the tax is at prohibitive levels. Do you think India should now reconsider its position on cryptos?
Look, I don't want to advise the government on what it should do. There are genuine concerns about crypto because crypto can lead to money laundering. Having said that, this is also a tipping point for the mainstream of crypto. How the government squares that circle is for the government to answer, not for me, but there will have to be some consideration. On data, on AI, on e-commerce, as I said, on all of these, there will be pressure to take positions that are more in harmony with US interests and US corporations. And again, in some of these areas, India will benefit too. Indian companies also stand to benefit by working with US companies. So there will be a fairly open-minded discussion on this and call on this, an enlightened call on this. In terms of US automobiles, the new or the revised electric vehicle policy does take cognizance of the fact that India wants to transition to cleaner fuels, cleaner automotive fuels. It does give scope to international companies or vehicle manufacturers, including American ones, to come here to make in India, but also sell imported cars, at least initially for some years. There is a window there. I think the government would expect US companies with interest in those areas to actually take advantage of those opportunities which are already opened up.
Right. Now, speaking about EVs, Tesla, Elon Musk, India has been in conversation with Elon Musk for the last 4 to 5 years now. Recently, they've not shown any interest in the new scheme for promoting electric car manufacturing in India. But what is the kind of impact do you see Elon Musk having on Donald Trump vis-a-vis India?
Elon Musk is obviously a very influential person in the Trump setup and administration. He has business interests in several areas: e-vehicles, telecom, space, all of which could potentially see India as a big market or as a partner. It's for him to put his cards on the table, to be quite honest.
Right. I'd also like to ask you about the Russia-Ukraine war. So far, India, when it comes to the two wars that are going on in the world, the Middle East and Europe, India has maintained strategic autonomy. We have maintained alliances and relationships and also condemned these wars and say that we have to end these wars. But do you think Donald Trump is going to put a lot of pressure in India to cut energy ties with Russia, buy more energy from the United States and reduce the defense relationship as well?
Please understand that the crude oil purchase from the Russians post the beginning of the Ukraine war was completely legitimate and legal, and it was a window allowed for India in consultation with Western countries, including the United States and the Biden administration. The oil was bought by India completely legally under the price cap. It was refined in India. Some of it was used in India. Much of it was sold to other countries, including Western countries and countries in Europe. So, and what India did at that point kept oil prices low, because it's not if the Russian oil tap was shut down, it wasn't as if oil was going to come from Mars. There was no other oil available. This is the only world where oil is produced. So the fact is, as an energy importing country, as an energy dependent country, like many other countries, India had an interest, and the world had an interest in keeping oil prices manageable. And the India-Russia trade, with the complete understanding of major global powers, managed to do that. Now, if Trump opens up sale of US gas and oil, and I appreciate that cannot happen immediately. It will take some time for those facilities to start cranking up. If those sources of energy become available and those are cheaper than Russian energy, then obviously Indian companies will look at that. I mean, it's economics 101, with the Indian refiners, with the public sector or private sector, will look at the cheapest and best available source of crude oil.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik, for joining us with that very important view on how the new Trump administration would be viewing India. And what I found very interesting is how crypto could be a tipping point for the world with the kind of stand that Trump has taken. And he openly said that US will be the AI and crypto capital of the world. So let's see how things pan out in the days to come. Thank you once again for being with us here on Global Eye. On that note, we take a short break, but don't go anywhere. We discuss the relationship between India and the US under Trump 2.0 with Vikas Swarup, former Indian ambassador to Canada, on the other side. Welcome back. You are watching Global Eye. US President Donald Trump has warned of 100% import tariffs on BRICS countries if they took any steps towards cutting the use of the dollar in global trade and making their own currency. However, during his speech, Trump reiterated that this statement should not be seen as a threat, but rather as a clear stance on the issue. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar concluded his bilateral trip to the United States and is upbeat about the future between the two nations. Speaking at a press conference after meeting with his counterpart Marco Rubio, the minister said that the new Trump administration has clear interest to take the relationship between India and the US forward. What would the Modi government and Trump administration want from the India-US relationship, and what could be the areas of alignment and areas of friction? Joining us now to take this forward is Vikas Swarup, former Indian ambassador to Canada. Ambassador Swarup, thank you very much for joining us on Global Eye. Let me begin by asking you, do you think India has been successful in making early outreach with the Trump administration? We had the first bilateral soon after Marco Rubio got off the inauguration ceremony.
Absolutely. I think India has been very quick off the block. If you remember, Prime Minister Modi was probably among the first few leaders to call up President Trump on his election victory. And then the fact that our foreign minister was there at the inauguration, and the first bilateral meeting that Marco Rubio had after his confirmation was with our external affairs minister, I think itself speaks volumes for the priority that the Trump administration is going to accord to India. And most importantly, I think the personal rapport that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have, which we saw very clearly during the Namaste Trump and Howdy Modi events in America and India respectively. I think that augurs very well for the future of the India-US relationship. I think India will be a very, very important part of US foreign policy going forward. And I think President Trump will attach a considerable deal of importance to expanding the relationship with India.
So when we heard him speaking at Davos, it was quite clear that he has put the domestic agenda first, perhaps even stronger than his first term in power. What do you think he will want from countries like India?
I think his priorities will be very, very clear, and these priorities will align perfectly with both his domestic as well as his external agenda. So I think the first thing that he would ask from India would be trade concessions and market access. He has already labeled India as a tariff king. And if you remember, even in his first term, he had withdrawn the generalized system of preferences for India that was in play at that time. He had talked about the tariffs on Harley-Davidson, for instance. So we can expect, certainly, that President Trump would want India to lower its tariff barriers and provide greater market access to American companies and American products. That's the first thing. I think the second thing that he would expect from India would be a better harmonization with America on immigration and visa policies. We have already seen that about 18,000 undocumented Indians are said to be returned back to India. And I think that is something that we have accepted. Provided their nationality is verified, I think we have no option but to take them back. And that would be a good signal also to the Americans of our good intentions in this regard, because eventually what we want to protect is the H-1B program. This is a program that has yielded very good dividends, both for India and America. It has allowed mobility for our tech talent to go to America and work with the top American companies. And at the same time, it has allowed American economic competitiveness because, Indian tech talent is among the best in the world. I think the third thing that President Trump would ask from India is geopolitical alignment. You started your program by talking about his threat to the BRICS, because I think he's got a bee in his bonnet about BRICS trying to promote an alternative currency and trying to promote de-dollarization. We have, of course, already clarified that our only aim is to expand our policy options, and we have no intention of replacing the dollar. But I think he would want greater geopolitical alignment on the part of India. He would want India to distance itself more from Russia and China and work more closely with the US, not only through the Quad mechanism, but also in general on Indo-Pacific framework. So my broad sense is that these would be the three main areas in which President Trump would seek, some concessions from India.
You spent a lot of time in Canada, Ambassador Swarup, and today India-Canada ties are at their worst possible point. You saw what Donald Trump had to say about Canada, about the European Union. What do you think will be the realignment of US relationship with key allies, including Canada and the European Union?
Yes, I think, of course, much of it is bluster. I do not think that Trump is in any way trying to tear up the transatlantic alliance and completely leave Europe rudderless. Because if you have seen, he has moderated his stance on the Russia-Ukraine war also. At one time, he had said, I will resolve this war within 24 hours. But now he's saying that if Russia does not cooperate, if President Putin does not reciprocate, then he can impose very high tariffs and sanctions on Russia. So my sense is that he is already moderating his position. As far as Europe is concerned, what he really wants is that they should accept greater commitment in terms of defense spending. And in fact, he wants the level to be raised from 2% to 5%. So that is where I think he's going to make a big ask of the Europeans. And I suppose the Europeans will have to adjust their policies in this regard. As far as Canada is concerned, it's very interesting because he keeps on repeating the threat that unless Canada joins the United States as its 51st state, he will impose high tariffs on Canada as early as February 1. I don't think there is any danger of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. I've lived there, I've served there. And I think one thing that defines Canadians is that they are not Americans. So I don't think that's happening. And there is across the board political support for Canada to retain its independence and its own stance in foreign affairs. My sense is he wants to renegotiate the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement, which was already renegotiated. If you remember, earlier it was called NAFTA, but in Trump 1.0, it was renegotiated and called USMCA. He wants further concessions from Canada. And I think Canada will have to concede on some aspects, because even if they impose their retaliatory tariffs on America, the problem is Canada is very dependent on the American market. 76% of Canada's exports go entirely to the United States. 90% of their oil goes only to the United States, whereas the US only depends on Canada for 17% of its trade. So my sense is that Canada has the weaker hand in this. There will be some negotiations, and eventually my guess is a compromise will be reached.
My final question on the Russia-Ukraine war. When we heard Trump at Davos, he spoke repeatedly about this being a ridiculous war, about how he wants to meet Putin very soon. And he was explicit that many young people are dying in Ukraine. Ukraine is ready for a deal. Putin now needs to agree. Do you think he'd be able to bring this war to an end anytime soon?
Well, we have seen his proclivities as a deal maker. We saw what happened in Gaza, where just the threat that, before his inauguration, there must be a ceasefire, finally convinced Netanyahu to come to the negotiating table and accept an agreement which was in place for the last 13 months. But President Biden was just not able to get him to sign on the dotted line. But President Trump managed to do that. Now, as far as Ukraine is concerned, as I said earlier, it's slightly more knotty. My sense is that President Zelensky has already indicated his willingness to discuss this and to have a negotiated settlement. If President Putin does not come to the negotiating table anytime soon, then I think there'll be a change in Trump's attitude, and we might see more sanctions being put on Russia. But eventually, there will be some kind of a negotiated settlement. It all depends on how soon the Trump-Putin summit can be held, and what is brought to the table. Because he has said very clearly that both sides will have to make concessions, which means Russia will also have to make concessions, which so far President Putin has not indicated any willingness to do so.
Right. And of course, he'll have to give a face saver and some sort of a win to every side in this negotiation, because that's how deal making always works in the end. Thank you so much, Ambassador Swarup, for joining us on Global Eye with your view on decoding Trump 2.0 now that they are in the White House, and how India should approach the new administration as well. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV18 for all the news and updates.